You found authenticity through your faith.
Mm-hmm.
You found authenticity through specific tenets in your faith, particularly fasting, Catholic fasting.
Right, Catholic fasting.
Which
Forgotten by even the majority of Catholics have no clue on the history. That's why I studied it for 3 years before I wrote the book, The Definitive Guide to Catholic Fasting and Abstinence, because I wanted to just learn and live it a bit more myself. And then, a lot of it's not just how do people live now, but traditionally, how do they live? Some years, what did my grandparents do or their grandparents, and how did people live then? And what I determined was the information out there was very contradictory. You were piecing together historical records, people's vague recollection. Grandma said we did this. Grandma's memory might not be the greatest, or she remembers something as a child, so it must have been this case, but that might have been some regional, peculiarity. So what I wanted to do was actually make a definitive guide to what did it mean to be a Catholic throughout time, how was fasting done, how was abstinence from certain foods done, when was it practiced, how was it practiced, and what I determined was very fascinating because it provided not just a roadmap for me to what to live by, but I started teaching it to other people.
Mm-hmm.
I have an online group of about 500 people on Telegram who commit to living this sort of traditional fasting life. They talk about immense benefits, but what I'll say now is it's just so interesting that this just didn't exist in a concrete place. So sometimes you get really into something. You want to learn it. You want to live it. And then when you do, you're like, wow, this is great. I just want to make it available for other people. And it's interesting how so many people out there are really craving for self-improvement and enrichment in all different aspects of their life. And you don't always have to reinvent the wheel because you can look to what people have done for literally hundreds of years. You don't need, super expensive equipments or systems or people. Simply not eating certain times can rewire the brain and really improve your own life. And it has immensely improved mine over the past 5 to 6 years that I've been doing this.
It's interesting. We hear a lot about fasting, right? You hear about intermittent fasting,
Mm-hmm.
but you hear about it in a context detached from spirituality.
Yes.
Where did fasting start in the Catholic tradition?
Well, it actually started before the Catholic Church was founded. So obviously we believe the Catholic Church is a continuation and a perfection of the Jewish tradition. And Jews fasted too. Traditionally, many Jews I even talked to don't even know this. They fasted devotionally on Tuesdays and Thursdays because that was in honor of Moses going to Mount Sinai one day and the other day he descended. So that was a weekly, devotional fast. And they had other days too, like Yom Kippur also where they fasted as well. But the Catholic Church took a lot of these fasting elements, at least the spirituality of them, some of the ways in which it was practiced, and appropriated that. So very early on, after the Lord, died, rose again, ascended to heaven, and the apostles were governing the church, Christians started fasting every Wednesday and Friday. And that was the case for a long period of time. Some places added Saturdays as well. There's a lot of regional differences, but basically you get 2 to 3 days every week. And you had the 40 days leading up to Easter for Lent. And that was very, very early on. Like historical records bear witness to this. And that's how fasting was done. And more was added on in that time. But you could say it went back to the very commencement of Christianity.
Very interesting. And so this practice predates Catholic religion itself. It's a continuation of that Abrahamic tradition.
Absolutely, because, when I wrote the book, The Definitive Guide to Catholic Fasting and Abstinence, one of the initial things I did at the beginning of the book was tie, why do you fast? Mm-hmm. And part of why we fast and how we fast goes back to the very beginning, because some of the church fathers, like St. Basil the Great and others, state that we fast because Adam and Eve failed in their fasting. So they were told not to do one thing, not to eat of one fruit from one particular tree, and they couldn't do it. They gave in to that, and they actually ate it. So they gave in to their failure to fast. So you might say that the failure of mankind wasn't just pride, like everybody talks about, but it was also a failure to fast. It was gluttony. So fasting was meant to make reparation for sin, but also to make reparation at the very beginning of the commencement of the world for this.
Reparation as in punishment or reparation as in remembrance?
Well, both, but, obviously in the Catholic tradition, there's a lot of focus on reparation for sin. Our sins, that's why we do penance, but also the sins of other people of our family or friends or society, because there's this collective debt that is owed to God for the sins of the world, and we can make up for that debt, not just our own debt, but those have long been before us too, because they're united to us too. Even if they're in heaven or not, we're still united to them. So it goes back to the very beginning of time.
Interesting.
And then if you look at the prophets too, you look at Elijah, you look at John the Baptist, I mean, you look at Moses, there was always fasting done. So fasting is really much how people have lived their life since the beginning of the world. And if you look at how the Jews fasted, that's actually how early Christians fasted too. It's very interesting because as I studied it, it's almost like that's where Islamic fasting came from too.
Which I have so many questions about too, because I could go. I recently had an imam on, and we talked about some of these tenets, and it sounds like there's a lot of correlation.
There is, because if you look at how did the early Christians fast, so I talked about a little bit of when they did, this times during the week, and then obviously leading up to Easter and the Lenten season. But how did it look? Well, just like the Jews, fasting was done where you only had one meal a day, and it was after the sun had set. And even the very early church, you had no food whatsoever, including no water, until the sun set, and then you had your meal.
So no food, no drink while the sun is up.
And then when the sun goes down, you have your meal. And when your meal is done, nothing again until the sun has gone down again.
And this is true of the Jewish faith. They fast similarly.
Until sunset, yes. Traditionally, of course. I mean, I know of the Jewish people, I know most of them don't really practice any of this anymore. Also because the Jewish religion today isn't really the same Jewish religion. There is no temple. There's no animal sacrifice. So, I mean, the synagogue is not the same as the temple at all.
A lot of the rituals were tied to a physical building.
Absolutely.
Right? A lot of were tied to the temple. So things have kind of changed a little bit.
Changed radically.
Religions evolve over time and with history.
Yeah, that changed totally. So, I mean, you can't really say that the modern Jewish religion is the exact same. There's actually, I heard a group that wants to do animal sacrifice and bring a temple back, and I heard they're somewhere in Europe. But that's a bit of an aside. That there does exist that. But basically, early Christian fasting was a continuation of how the Jews fasted.
Interesting.
Where it was one meal after sunset. But when you were done with that meal, nothing again till the sun is set the next day. So it was very much like a marathon, especially Lent. So you were eating once, and the character of that meal was also vegan. So a lot of people associate Catholics with eating fish on Fridays and during Lent. And that actually, in my research, it was determined, it was about the 6th century when fish was beginning to be allowed on days when you had to pertain to abstinence. Beforehand, it was entirely vegan. And part of that reason was really taking man back to before the Great Flood. So Noah was the first person in human history to eat meat. So after the ark and after he made sacrifice, he ate of animal flesh for the very first time. So this is meant to take away that gift of God that he's given to man after the flood. We want to take away that gift. And that's also in the very early church. If you know, Noah was also the first person to drink wine. In the very early church, wine was not allowed to have on fasting day because those two gifts given to mankind through Noah were to be taken away.
Interesting. So were there any animal sacrifice of, say, prophets prior to Noah?
Animal sacrifice, yes. I mean, we clearly see that too, obviously, with like Abel, for instance.
But not really eating these animals. What did they do?
Right, no, they did not eat of flesh. Noah's the first person to eat meat.
Interesting.
He's also the first person to make wine. Too. Could we know the story that obviously he got drunk because he didn't know what he was doing, and how one of his sons saw him and didn't cover him, and he was expelled. But this is really much bringing man back to a primitive state of take away the consolations of God in these fasting periods and do penance.